morning, folks. This is Talking Point here on WESN, your content capital show. Michael Small here, flying solo once again. Don't worry. You will see Heaton Shaw on the Talking Point set soon. However, today we would be expecting the good lady herself. The situation between Guyana and Venezuela, it seems to be escalating. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that it will result in a conflict, at least one could hope. But it puts now the international community in a interesting position, difficult position. More on that when the good lady herself comes. That also includes us. It puts us in a difficult position. On one hand, we have a CARICOM member. On the other hand, we have a strategic business partner. What do we do? What is right for the people of Trinidad and Tobago? A question that either side of the matter might even take affront to, that we would even consider it a question. But to some extent, as a sovereign state ourselves, we do have to consider the question for the sake of our own citizens and at the very least consider what is best for us, but also what's going on between these two parties and what stance you could take. It's not the only criteria. What is best for us is not the only criteria, but to some extent, we do have to at least ask the questions. With that said, though, we'll get into that later. It's an interesting time where I do wonder if we have gotten some informal, how to say this, admissions of certain things. Maybe we might not realize it or not. Again, the criminal justice system is at the forefront. This time, it's with issues regarding our legislation. And that is not necessarily the Ministry of National Security, that's the Office of the Attorney General. What am I talking about? For more, let's kick off this morning's Daily Review. So, there are many issues with our criminal justice system. Two of the big issues are delays at trials or just how long it takes. Case in point, there's a case going on for a police shooting that happened in 2011. We're talking a 12-year time difference, I believe. So, at this point, 12 years later, it's still important to the public, but the case, the accused have been in limbo. There's some degree of guilty until proven innocent in the informal sense within the national sphere, within our society, and to some extent that is to be expected. That's just human nature. So not having a trial, not having the quick resolution, it's harmful for the accused whether they're guilty or not. Well, or rather, if they're innocent, then it's definitely harmful. It's harmful to the victims because they have to wait. And it's harmful to the case because recalling past events, witnesses might move or pass away. Things could get lost, whether legitimately or not. But also, as we have mentioned on the show repeatedly, there's the issue of people just being on remand where you are incarcerated, but you're not actually been convicted of anything yet. And while, yes, there will be some who are guilty and they're found guilty and the system will kind of resolve itself, there are others who the case falls apart for whatever reasons and they sue the state. One could argue they're not all innocent, but at the same time, isn't the standard innocent until proven guilty? And this sort of de facto imprisonment, at some point, we all run the risk of running into this problem. What if we can't afford bail? What if bail just happens to not be provided to us? Then what do we do? It's fine when we think it's just criminals being affected, but in this case, it's also what about the rest of the population? And then, of course, the AG, he was speaking about that. He was speaking about taking away the, let me get the correct term. Taking away preliminary inquiries and introducing what he terms as a more effective case management process, replacing them with new sufficiency hearings. And this is apparently going to be rolled out by December of this year. And they will undertake efforts to properly educate the various groups involved, parties involved that needs to be educated on how this new system is going to work. That's fine. What's not necessarily fine is how is this going to actually fix the problem? Because the problem is, for whatever reason, things took too long. Right? Apparently, there's supposed to be a reduction in backlog of cases, fewer hearings and administrative processes related to inquiries. Okay, but you still have a sufficiency hearing, so you still have a pre-trial process. Couldn't you just have made the preliminary inquiries more efficient? I don't know if he sufficiently explained the differences. Mainly to say, how will the new system prevent the pitfalls of the old? Because at the end of the day, you're not saying we're cutting out a step. You're saying we're just replacing a step with something like it, but different. But how is it different? Or will this just be, I mean, you can set up the basic framework to be different. You could have intentions of it being different, and then on a practical level, you might end up with the same problems because you're not actually treating with the issues. You're just putting a new label to the same old situation. Also, more legislation or amendments to existing legislation is coming down the pipe to deal with various matters with regards to our crime fighting process. This includes a bill to bring or to authorize the police to carry out sting operations against certain serious crimes like money laundering, human trafficking, drug trafficking, firearm trafficking, etc. That's what's been reported. Apparently, we've never really had sufficient enough legislation to carry out sting operations, something that I do believe many citizens have called in to speak about why the police doesn't do something like this, something like a sting operation. And that leads me to just like how I'm questioning the removal of the preliminary inquiry for a, what's the term again? Sufficiency hearing, which I'm not entirely sure even what is the difference in the terms. But I have to ask, to what extent now, okay, what are we doing to treat with the actual problem? Will the sufficiency hearing treat with the actual problem? Okay, what about the wider problems of the criminal justice system? Because they want to bring back a bail legislation again. And there are limitations to what this can do. The Sting Act is great because I don't think anybody would argue that we shouldn't have the capability. But what about the other issues? Are we addressing the other issues with the criminal justice system from the angle of legislation? Why do I say that? Let's go on to the second topic, because the second topic is linked where once again the issue of opposition support has come up. Opposition Senator Janti Lashmidial, she's been on the show quite a few times, those who watch the show. She criticized the government over various aspects about crime fighting, and then the response to that was, well, look, the opposition, they talk about all of these things, but when it came time for the Bail Act, they didn't support us. Now, to some extent, I'm worried that this could all be political gamesmanship, potentially from either side, to say, you see, that's why the talks failed. They're setting us up saying, look at all the ways they didn't get the job done, this is from the opposition, or they don't cooperate, this is from the government. So then when the talks fail, you know, they'll just point back to that excuse. Now, the bail bill, to some extent, is an example that the government could point to, and factually they're right. Okay, the opposition didn't support it. So when they make that claim, it's factually true. They're not lying there. But to say that the bail bill, what would it have accomplished? Have we really debated that? How would it have applied? Have we really debated that? When you have a 13% detection murder rate, the question of bail is very secondary. Things like an act to allow the police to conduct sting operations, now we get somewhere that could, that sort of perspective, that direction, how do we improve the legal framework to allow the police to conduct investigations? That could impact this 18% detection rate. Bail Act is not. You have to still get suspects to charge for the Bail Act to matter. And then as Karen pointed out, listen, at the end of the day, this sort of thing, the Privy Council had issues with it. And more importantly, it's not as though we have murderers on a regular basis just being allowed to go on the street with bail. It's up to judicial determination. So, the fact of the matter is, with this issue, and there's a lot of moving parts that the problems are so wide. The AG, okay, I commend them for wanting to bring legislation, either to provide new capabilities or to clean up existing issues. But to some extent, I do have to ask, why was there no act to allow the police, to authorize the police to carry out sting operations for things like money laundering, human trafficking, drug trafficking, and firearm trafficking? See, the last two, at the very least, the last two has been a concern for years. Maybe I'm wrong, but I was under that impression, especially the drugs. Firearms has become more of an issue as higher caliber weapons, more powerful weapons, fully automatic weapons are becoming more and more readily available. And I just like to point out that here we have, you know, a debate going on. I understand you're not supposed to be friends in a debate, but as far as I've seen, the crime talks have stalled. And really and truly, a lot of our issues come from the fact that no one is positively pushing for our legislative framework to be improved when it comes to crime fighting. It's now happening. It's now happening. To what extent do we need opposition support now to push these things through? And if the opposition have legitimate questions, will that be used to sink the legislation? These have been issues for a while. We've had multiple administrations from both parties within the last 15 years. But these were issues even before that. How is it that we're now seeing an attempt at this? Where were all the previous administrations before? And I would argue that they were very busy with their political business. And now at this point in time when, you know, it's their fault, no, it's their fault, no, it's their fault. It might seem very obvious, and it's been said before. But I think at the end of the day, because we want to talk about solutions, right? And maybe it's a misunderstanding. But until the political landscape changes, so that we could get a constructive legislative process to deal with the deficiencies with our crime-fighting laws. Things like bail and the death penalty are secondary. Death penalty is on the books, but it can't get done. Even the time spent in remand to some extent is secondary to the fact that we have to find criminals first. Why is it that when it's time to conduct election business, a lot of stuff gets done? But to be fair to the police, and one could argue I've been fair for this week, But to be fair to them, they can only conduct operations based on the laws available to them. And apparently they weren't able to carry out things like stings, something I think many of us took for granted that they could do, because there weren't laws for it. Why did it take so long? There was more topics that I wanted to get into, but I was still wrapping my head around all the different aspects of this. So we're more or less out of time. We do have the good lady herself. We'll take a break. When we come back, we're going to dive deeper, I should say, compared to how far I went yesterday with regards to the dispute between Guyana and Venezuela. Is it a dispute just yet? How far will it go? Well, we'll talk about that when we come back.
Bill and Ruth fell in love with the Benjamin Moore color Dry Sage, but they tried to match it using another brand's paint.
I mean, it's close enough.
Almost identical, really. Yeah, there it is.
Never trust another paint to be a Benjamin Moore color.
Let the Home Store turn your house into a home you love. Get everything you need to give your home that special look and feel. We offer household items, lawn and garden, paint center, hardware, plumbing, lighting and electrical, toys and storage solutions. 5 convenient locations: 6th Avenue Barataria, The Falls at Westmore, Pennywise Plaza Shoguanas, C3 Center Branch and C3 San Fernando. Check out our Facebook page for more information and come visit us today. The Home Store. Turn your house into a home you love.
You gave us the inspiration to be first. We gave you the solutions that put you first. You walked with us side by side, and we continue to serve you with pride. First Citizens celebrates with you 30 years of achieving dreams, shaping success stories, and painting brighter futures together. And together, we'll accomplish so much more. First Citizens, together, 30 and beyond.
Alan's Funeral Home, Tunapuna. Relax. We know the loss of a loved one can be challenging, but we've got your back for all your funeral needs, from documents to the service and or burial. Let Alan's Funeral Home take care of you and your loved ones. We are located on the Eastern Main Road in Tunapuna. Call us today at 663-1829 or visit allansfuneralhome.com. Alan's Funeral Home. Let us take care of business.
From Maracas Bay to Arafita Avenue and Piaco, Richard's Bake and Shark brings the world's most popular fish sandwich closer to you. Open daily at all our locations.
The newest book is here, Closer to the Church, the debut novel by author and former mayor Louis Lee Singh. Available at all the home store branches, Barataria, West Mall, Shogunas and C3 San Fernando. Paper-based bookshop 10 Nook Avenue St. Anne's, WESN 30A Gattaca Street Woodbrook, Metropolitan Bookshop Ariapita Avenue Woodbrook, and all RIK bookstores nationwide. Available online as paperback on Amazon.com and Kindle for e-readers. For more info, call 628-5835 or 389-6504. Also available from author Louis Lee Singh, I Used to Live in Heaven, Letters to My Granddaughters, and Local Government in Trinidad, Conspiracy Against the People.
Welcome back to Talk About, ladies and gentlemen. And yesterday I mentioned, I didn't really give an opinion on what's going on between Guyana and Venezuela because, to be honest, I didn't necessarily want to make judgment on something like this, which has serious implications more than just me. It's one thing if I, fire off a strong opinion that it will reflect mainly on myself, but this is an international thing, and I wanted to see how it played out a little bit. Well, it played out a little bit overnight, and the good lady herself, she also is monitoring the situation and has concerns because it brings up questions, ongoing questions with regards to our relationships with our neighbors. And these are things that we do need to kind of figure out, where are we going to stand? We don't necessarily have to make a declaration now, but we can't let it take us by surprise and then try to rush and figure it out at the 11th hour. For more on this topic, of course, we have former Minister of Finance and the legal scholar South Karen Shishera. Karen, good morning.
Good morning to you, and good morning, Sean, to your viewers also. And yes, we did have some discussions because we always do that, by the way. Always, touch base to see, well, what are we going to look at this when I come on the Wednesday. And so, yes, the issue regarding to Ghana has a lot of permutations to it, more than what we have read. And of course, I think it acted as a trigger for me wanting to dive a little deeper down into the major issues. So let me just start with, I think it was on one of the newspapers, was a big photo. I mean, you couldn't help but look at what apparently looked like thousands of people. It may have been hundreds, but it certainly looked like a lot of people who had flocked to C3 Center in Corinth, on the outskirts of San Fernando, after a chance to work in Guyana. And there were a number of places that they think. So it's not a question of what we will call persons flooding your country, hoping to get a job. We are being invited. We are being invited to go there. And that is such a fantastic thing. And it is not just to work at, they said some of the companies, real estate, construction, but they especially want to take advantage in a positive way. I see it, our oil and expertise and our natural gas expertise. So the response was overwhelming. And it was for plumbers, civil engineers, building inspectors, you name it, that's what they called for. So when we talk about them being migrants, they are truly migrants who have been, not refugees, they are persons who are coming to a country, invited to the country. But what I wanted to really use that as a platform is to speak about which country is that, and that country is a CARICOM country. And, I wanted to speak a little bit about what that means for us as a CARICOM region, and perhaps one of the reasons why to date the CARICOM has not been able to achieve its objectives, because it seems that we always seem to be almost in competition with each other. I'm sure the European Union has members who don't like each other, who don't care for each other, but they understand there's strength in numbers, and that's what CARICOM is intended to do. So what I wanted to say very briefly was going to look at what was the objective, overall objective of the of CARICOM, which is the started with the Treaty of Chaguaramas, and it's forerunner the West Indian Federation of 1958, which we know collapsed in 1962. And we all know the statement, 1 from 10 leaves 0. When Jamaica had a referendum and the person said that they wanted to come out. It had a lot to do with, I think it has something to do with the direct taxation. But one good thing that came out of it is the University of the West Indies, because there was a commitment to tertiary education, united approach to tertiary education. And that was out of that was born what we call the University of the West Indies. Started as a college, University College in Jamaica in 1948 and 1960. Before we became independent, we had the University of the West. So that's one good thing that came out of it. But coming back to the issue of the CARICOM, and I'm going to look at it and counterpoint it against what I consider an unacceptable influx of unregistered Venezuelans into this country. And I want to make the point, unregistered Venezuelans into this country. And I have no doubt that the numbers that we are given are absolutely wrong. They're absolutely not reflective of the numbers that are in this country. And I just want to say,
Yeah, just to make sure to clarify, you don't have an issue with legal migrants?
No, I don't.
Those that go through the process
Absolutely.
and they're contributing members to society, of which we traditionally have many, but the illegal migration is out of proportion.
It's out of proportion, and I mean, we've always had, I think many people in Trinidad will say they have Venezuelan roots or Venezuelan family or something like that. So we're not, but we're talking about the implications of this constant, unmitigated flow of unregistered Venezuelans into this country with all the potentials that does read. So let me start, and one of the things it does impact on is this dream of CARICOM, because Venezuela is not a CARICOM country. It is not a CARICOM. And why am I making that a point? Because first of all, I just want to very briefly say that the Treaty of Chaguaramas, which is our CARICOM, set out what its major objectives are. If you go and look at it, you see it online, you can read it. But what it says, we're looking at some of its major objectives, and that's all I'm going to look at briefly. Full employment and other factors of population, of production for our countries, our members. Accelerated coordination and sustained economic development. Expansion of trade and economic relations with third states, meaning non-CARICOM states. Enhanced functional cooperation, so that they are talking in areas such as health, education, and transport. So there are other things which I'm not going to go into. So you understand the purpose of CARICOM. And it seems that the purpose of CARICOM is being sidelined, and it's seeing in fact being diluted, and it's seen at risk. And one of the things that worried me was when our own Prime Minister, in the times of COVID, when things were, people were dying, literally hundreds of people a day, we had the Prime Minister of our country boasting, but also in a sense, decrying and bringing into, in a negative way, another CARICOM country, and that was the vaccine plan, the vaccines that were available. He said that we have 465,000 vaccines. He says, yeah, there's another country that has more than ours, that's Guyana. But that doesn't matter because their vaccines are not approved. I mean, you as a CARICOM, you as a member of CARICOM. So it caused the advisor to the Minister of Health to hit back at that and say that, this is what you're going to say as a member of CARICOM, that you're going to say, you have more, but they may have more, but theirs don't count because it's not approved. And you had even their chamber in Guyana speaking about it and talking about the implications for the relationship between Guyana and Trinidad and CARICOM, for our own Prime Minister to say something like that. But what really, so that is one of the issues that concerns me, but I think people have to understand also too, that when people talk about people migrating, as we're seeing in the United States, by the way, Biden has sent back 20,000 Venezuelans back to Venezuela. He's just done that recently because Venezuelans and other persons from Central America, it's becoming a big problem because the Republican members are sending them by the busload into sanctuary cities, which happen to be Democratic cities that already have a high minority level, poverty, crime. So you're bringing into our country problems that those cities cannot deal with, and which is a democratic president, he knows he needs a minority vote. And I know there's no real parallel between what's going on between Palestine and Israel, but I would just say that in 1905 there were about 3% population of Jews in Palestine. And if you follow it, you know now that's far from the truth. But I won't go into that. But you could see the problems there. And our own prime minister did say a few years back when he was asked to declare the persons coming refugees. And he said, no, they're not refugees. Well, he had his reasons, because to say they were refugees meant they were escaping political persecution, and that would not be helpful to an arrangement with with Venezuela, with the Dragon Field and the Laurel Manatee and the natural gas that we need. But he did say, though, that they are migrants, and like migrants, they are free to go and look for jobs, just like how we go to Miami. Trinidad can't afford that because we're too small. Our space is too small. Mm-hmm. He said that. He said that our space was too small. So you know the space is too small. And on top of that, when we look at the unemployment rate, understand this, and I think that's important, and I'm going to give you the things that have happened that will make you wonder, should we be in such a close relationship with a country that is a non-CARICOM country that is actually fighting or in legally, and now it seems it's gone to a further level, our own CARICOM member who is inviting us to come to their country to help to build their country, which is consistent with the goals of CARICOM. So when we look at the Prime Minister's statements, unemployment rate, we see that the central bank issues a very low unemployment rate. And by the way, they do say in their thing, they get information from the Ministry of Labor, from advertisements in the newspaper and other sources in any way. But the point is, it starts with the participation rate, which is low. It's gone from 54 to 56%. But what does that mean? What that means is they use that rate to determine the rate of unemployment. There are so many people who are not going out there looking for jobs, who have stopped looking for jobs because they are underemployed, because their salaries simply cannot pay their basic living expenses. And people who were interviewed for this migration to Venezuela, invited to participate. To Guyana, invited to come there and participate in the economic boom. Many of them said one of the reasons we're going is the jobs we have, we can't live on them. So when we want to tell us 4.7 or whatever he wants to say it is, start with the participation rate and say why is it so low, and then say to us who it is that you're talking about are employed. And it brings me to the point about the same CARICOM issue, and you have to be very careful with Venezuela. And I'm not saying that just like that. And also that goes to the statement of our current Minister of Energy, who could possibly say that we would have gas from Dragonfield in 2025, which coincidentally is the year of our elections. Who could he possibly say that? Any person, I am not an energy expert, but neither is the Prime Minister Rowley. And in 2019, when he thought that they could have gotten the Dragonfield, which they hadn't because of all the problems that we continue to have in this country about lack of implementation, etc., he said then it would be 2024. So he knew it was 4 to 5 years. And most persons will tell you that's 4 to 8 years. But miraculously, we are at the end of 20, so you could say we're in 2024, and he's telling you that you must believe in 1 year they will have gas. Well, I mean, pigs could fly too. But it's hard to accept it. It's hard to accept that to be the truth. But what is really very worrying, and this is part of the problem that I have with the Venezuelan, unregistered Venezuelan, quite apart from the fact that United States, if you look at the United States National Security Council, talking about transnational organized crime, and saying that a lot of the drugs and the transshipment of drugs are coming out of Venezuela to the United States and other countries. They didn't say which, but it was, I imagine it was Europe. And we know that is, who is transshipping it? You know, it's coming out of Venezuela. So Venezuela, not only are we under pressure because we simply, for the unregistered one, because we're simply too small. Not only are we under pressure because the quality of jobs that people are being offered now are simply not living wage jobs. Not only, but we are dealing with a country that is an adversary to one of our CARICOM members. And I will say that, number one. The three examples I will give, and I will quote from Eric Williams, actually, who had the foresight to see where we were going with that. This arbitral award of 1899 that was made between the British Guyana by the UK on one side and on behalf of Venezuela on the other side, the Netherlands and France, but basically created the boundaries between Guyana and Venezuela. And Guyana is disputing, Venezuela is disputing that boundary. They are claiming now 2/3, you hear what I said? 2/3 of Guyana's land, west of the Essequibo, and they want to extend the maritime boundaries further out. Why? Because of the finding of natural gas. And the arbitral agreement, I'm not going to go through all the details, but what happened is that eventually, because of Venezuela's position and regarding its claim on land belonging to Guyana, and according to that arbitral award, they had to end up with the Geneva Agreement in 1966, which they said that we let the Secretary General determine what's the best mode to settle this dispute. And in 1970, we got involved. They called it the Port of Spain Protocol, where they said, okay, we'll have a moratorium as to how we're going to resolve this. By 1983, we were nowhere nearer to dealing with this. But what is noteworthy is that just recently, May of this year, that the International Court of Justice, as a preliminary point, says they do have the jurisdiction to determine the validity of that arbitral award. And if that arbitral award of 1899 is upheld, as I feel fairly strongly that it will be, it will mean that those excursions and those demands of Venezuela to claim 2/3 of Guyana, when, especially now, when in 2030 they discovered oil. And by the way, when that discovery was made, just for your knowledge, it is from an article that I have the name of the article that I had read that informed me. It said the oil was discovered in 2013 by a Venezuelan Navy team conducting service on behalf of Guyana. On behalf of Guyana. So we have the arbitral award, which they will not acknowledge, and they have said that the International Court of Justice has no jurisdiction to hear the matter, even though they agreed to it with the Geneva Agreement. Even though they agreed to it. Do you understand what you're dealing with? And then before that, in 1973, when after the oil crisis, Venezuela set up what they call the Venezuelan Investment Fund, and there were contingencies attached to it, that you had to buy all of Venezuela, that is for the CARICOM countries or Caribbean countries. You had to purchase Venezuelan goods. You had to participate in a series of development and energy projects. And that in 1975, Eric Williams, our Prime Minister at the time, sounded the alarm bell and said Venezuela's territorial imperialism only is seen as that by Caribbean leaders, is not seen by Caribbean leaders anxious to profit from Venezuela's largesse. So we had the Venezuelan Investment Fund of 1973. And then following that, a series of negotiations with Venezuela to try to come to monetizing all that gas. And it took over 13 years, and they said it was a miracle. This is from the Vice Minister of Venezuela in Energy. He said Venezuela is unwilling to allow its gas to be used to support the future expansion of Atlantic energy at Point Fortin in Trinidad. And he said that in 2002. In 2006, according to the minister of Venezuela, I don't know which one he was, the LNG project is 20 years behind, and we are playing catch up with Trinidad and Tobago. Venezuela is left with no choice of leaving its gas fields stranded or aiding its main competitor. Do you understand Venezuela? And then you have the Petrocaribe deal. That Petrocaribe Prime Minister Manning said, that was under Chavez, he's had to say that he cautioned the Caribbean countries, nearly every one of which joined, and they was looked as a form of imperialism. That is what Prime Minister Eric Williams did say. He said that with the Venezuela Investment Fund, he said that what had happened, a vacuum had been created with the Britain leaving Venezuela.
You mean Guyana?
Leaving Venezuela. Leaving the Caribbean. Correct. Sorry, I'm getting it all thing. But what he did say is we have to be careful that we are not looking at another form of imperialism. That is what Prime Minister Eric Williams said in 1975 in the Petro-Caribe deal, to which Trinidad and Barbados were not members. They said that they put a lot. They gave them such fantastic terms. And the Prime Minister said, he cautioned fellow CARICOM members by saying, it is a question of cutting your own throat if you are not careful. And so we have to see the Petro-Caribe, the Venezuelan Investment Fund, all of these incursions, the arbitral award, all of them in its right context. And finally, on that point, we are now really sometimes they have disinformation. So I'm going to say, I'm just going to be careful to say, but I don't think it's not true. A video sent that now Venezuela, much as what happens when United States or whatever country or China, whoever wants to intimidate, what they do is they come near your border and start flying over your border, start bringing in militaries around your border. They're not touching you, but that's the way of intimidation. And very recently, you have a number of military, and Venezuela has a population of 800, not even a million. Okay?
You mean Guyana?
Guyana, because sorry, I keep saying that. Guyana does not have a population of more than a million. And Venezuela has a very strong military presence. And yet they have been carrying out military exercises just along the border between Venezuela and Guyana. There was even an explosion that they sent off an explosion. What is that intended to do? It is intended to intimidate a CARICOM country that is not bringing drugs out of, we don't have a thing bringing drugs out of South America via the Venezuela route with the guns and the ammunition. We do not have a situation where Venezuelans every 2 weeks or so we find them reported to be involved in criminal activity. We do not have a thing that is not a CARICOM member, but worse yet, who are attacking one of our own CARICOM members.
Threatening.
Well,
they have not attacked yet.
Okay, they have not, good word, yet. Threatening them. Threatening them. But it doesn't matter that it's threatening them. What it says is that they are asking us to come. They are asking us to build. That is what CARICOM is supposed to be. And yet we allow this country turns a blind eye to the unregistered Venezuelans. Oh, and by the way, I have to say this too, because when they said the first deal that they made about how Venezuela, would consider joining with us and allowing us to exploit their natural gas facilities. One of the conditions that was put forward then, I'm looking for exactly that's what I had underlined it, but he actually said that one of the things, and that is very, very, if you don't understand it, he said this, that we have to, this is what he said in the 1990s, Venezuela successfully attempted to build an LNG facility for over 15 years. Well, I think, and actually, one is actually functioning now, but it's for domestic purposes. But this is what they said. Venezuela, they expressed the interest in monetizing Venezuela's gas. And but one of the conditions was that we allowed the Venezuelans to have access to our health facilities and to assist them. This is before Biden's time, This is before Biden's time. That was a condition, allow them to have access to our health facilities and our social programs. That was one of the conditions when Venezuela was in difficult times. Does that sound familiar to you? So my last point is, I am not talking about the registered Venezuelans. We all have family from Venezuela. I have family from way back when, you know, they traced your family back, and who was an aunt from Venezuela and all of that. So I don't want anybody to misunderstand me. But Venezuela taking care of its own, America taking care of its own, we have to take care of CARICOM. And we cannot allow, and for our Minister of Energy, who went on saying, and I'm going to say it again, and said Train 1 was alive and well, right? Alive and well, and he knew that was not true. To come now and tell us in 2025, just the year of elections, we'll have gas from Dragon Field. I have to say one last point on that, because they have to keep up. Because someone from the opposition said, you are misleading because there's OPAC 24 and OPAC 25, meaning that the first arrangement was you could deal with them for a limited period of time, but 2 years, I think it was.
Yes.
But you would what? No cash. Okay. The reality is, it was extended to the end of October 2025, which is about 10 more months. But when you read from places like Washington Post, from Reuters, not Karen Teixeira, they are saying they have elections are not due till the end of 2024. And the main competitor, Machado, she is banned from participating in elections for 15 years. And they are saying that you cannot, this is what the Venezuelans are saying, they do not have confidence that, Maduro will stick to his agreement, especially in light of Iran. America's greatest fear is rehabilitating the largest oil refinery in Venezuela. And you now have from the BRICS countries, not only 6 new members, which include Iran and Saudi Arabia, but you have 40 countries asking to become members of BRICS. Why? To break the control of the US dollar and the control of using sanctions to control other countries. That was in yesterday or 2 days ago. 40 new members. I don't know if you're not looking at the geopolitics. So when the Minister of Energy tells you 2025, you guys, pigs can fly, I'm telling you that.
Because, I mean, first of all, I want to ask, you've pointed out, look, Guyana is inviting us to come. To me, at least recently, I don't really have any, and maybe I missed it. To me, Guyana seems like to be a decent neighbor to the rest of CARICOM, right? They don't need us. Yeah, I mean, Trinidad and Tobago has gotten accusations from other Caribbean nations how, oh, we the rich boys and we want to play like the big boys, right? But it doesn't seem as though Guyana is necessarily, you know, pulling their weight or shoving their weight around, right? And they were right alongside us with certain issues like food security, energy security, financial, to some extent, independence. That so President Ali, the Prime Minister of Barbados, oh gosh, how can I forget her name?
Mia Mottley,
and Dr. Keith Rowley, our Prime Minister, they headed up different committees with the Vice President of the U.S.
Mia Mottley played a very big role.
Right.
Imagine with this whole thing, just imagine with this whole thing about Biden looking at rethinking the position, which is geopolitics. Don't think it's Trinidad. Where was it held? In Barbados.
So my thing is, Guyana has been a good neighbor to CARICOM recently, despite the fact that they don't need CARICOM perhaps as much. They could have gone their own way if they wanted to.
No, what it says is that they are living what CARICOM was intended to do.
So
that is what they're doing.
Now the question is, potentially, the trust you brought up, and I think it's a legitimate concern. If the international community can't trust that Venezuela will allow free and fair elections, because I believe the official count is more or less done with the opposition primaries, and she got over 90% of the vote, right?
Right.
So to say that you want to now use some sort of legal, to bar her as though criticism...
15 years she's barred.
Because essentially she's criticizing the government, and you're kind of using a way to say, well, that's wrong.
But that's before now, you know, this is going on a few years back.
But my point is, they're making concessions to the international community to remove the sanctions. They might go back against those things. Now to some question, as you pointed out, right? Pigs could fly. Are we going to trust a deal with somebody who potentially is showing untrustworthy behavior? As you always say, past behavior is a good indicator of future behavior.
Absolutely.
Or do we stand besides Guyana, which on the surface...
Maybe we need to be doing more of that.
Because the thing is, dollars and cents wise, on the surface, we might not have as much direct gain from Guyana, but at the same, in the long run...
natural gas too, though.
Not just that, in the long run, they might be the more stable partner. They might be the more trustworthy
and we are
partner.
making too many concessions, and if CARICOM is to survive, that is the issue. We did the CARICOM.
Well,
this is CARICOM.
That's my next question. That's my next question.
CARICOM is going to survive.
Because the Minister of Health, he now said for the new block in the Port of Smith General, he wants to make it the premier regional teaching hospital. And I thought, well, if he manages to pull it off, and that's a big if, this could be in some ways another example of
medical tourism.
Not just that, but okay, it's a regional asset,
right.
Specialized asset, that could then show how do we now come together as a region. Okay, Trinidad has this, you have that, and how do we build up our capabilities?
We need the natural gas. We do need the natural gas.
Right, but my thing is this might undermine CARICOM.
But this is what I'm saying.
And then
this is what I'm
as
saying.
much as we need the natural gas, at some point when that runs out, CARICOM might look at us and say...
it has already kind of run out in the sense that it's not enough. But I just want to say what they're also saying about Maduro. Maduro, in the meanwhile, is getting his US dollars, through all kinds of means. And what they're saying is, finally, that whilst this 2024, end of 2024, since there's been a liberalization of paying the ash, the build-up of BRICS with 40 new members, the slow recovery of Russia, of China, the Ukraine-Russian war, what is going on in Israel and all of that. What we are saying is that he may have enough money built up, even though they still have these embargoes against him getting money that is in US banks, that he will say, to hell, forget about America, we're going to go with the BRICS countries, because they're also one of the members that are applying, Venezuela.
Yeah.
So there we go.
Just to point out, Venezuela's military looks like 100,000 plus active personnel. Guyana's population is nearly 800,000, and that ratio, that might seem, Guyana has more. No, I'm talking about the active military of Venezuela alone is equal to 1/8 of the Guyanese population. That is a significant threat to any nation when you are able to put that amount of numbers.
We are not against the registered Venezuelans. That's the point we make it.
No.
We are for CARICOM. There you have to smell the roses. You have to smell the coffee. And our Minister of Energy, please stop saying things that you know are not true.
If Venezuela went through the International Court of Justice, went through the proper international legal channels, that's one thing. But it seems as though potentially they want to sideline it, citing sovereignty.
Well, Dr. Eric Williams said so. Prime Minister Manning said so. You don't understand? Read the writing on the wall.
And then the last thing is, if Guyana's sovereignty could be threatened, what about us? I'm just going to throw that out there.
There we go.
All right, we have to break for news. We're over time. When we come back, we'll open up the phone line. Stay tuned.
There we go.
Here is the WESN News on the Hour. I am Sarah Ali. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. REC launches electricity bill calculator in anticipation of a rate increase. Woman narrowly escapes death after a light pole falls on her car. 2 arrested in $1 million cocaine seizure. And internationally, Instagram being sued over causing harm to young people's mental health. Now for the details. The Regulated Industries Commission has unveiled an electricity bill calculator aimed at assisting residential consumers in estimating their potential new bills should the Trinidad and Tobago Electricity Commission endorse the highest rate hike recommended by the RIC. This user-friendly calculator has been made available on the RIC's official website today. A woman narrowly avoids a fatal accident as a concrete light pole and transformer crash into her car's windshield during her drive through Pleasantville. According to police reports, the incident unfolded when the woman was trailing a cement truck in her black Kia Rio, navigating Chiconia Drive around 10:30 a.m. It was at this point that a truck inadvertently dislodged the overhead electrical lines and light pole. San Fernando Mayor Robert Paris highlighted that regulations stipulate vehicles exceeding specific height limits must notify the city corporation when traversing particular zones. Regrettably, in this case, no prior notification was given. 2 persons were arrested and a quantity of cocaine seized by officers of the Northern Division Task Force during an anti-crime exercise conducted in the El Socorro district yesterday afternoon. The roadblock exercise was conducted around 2:30 p.m. on Monday, 23rd October, and included officers from the NDTF Area South and the La Joquita Police Station. Acting on information, officers stopped a motor vehicle with 2 occupants. A comprehensive search of the vehicle was conducted, which resulted in the discovery of 36 boxes containing computer accessories. Further examination of the boxes revealed the presence of 1.038 kilograms of cocaine. The drug has an estimated street value of $1,447,906.52. The 2 occupants, a 58-year-old man of Diego Martin and a 37-year-old woman of Pitti Valley, were arrested in connection with the find. Investigations are ongoing. Internationally, Meta, the parent company of Facebook and Instagram, has been accused of misleading the public about the risk of using social media and contributing to a mental health crisis among the youth. The claims were made in a federal lawsuit, which was announced by dozens of U.S. states. They say the company used addictive features to ensnare users while concealing the substantial dangers of its platforms. Meta said it was disappointed. The lawsuit said Meta had broken consumer protection laws by engaging in deceptive conduct. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I'm Sarah Ali. Thanks for watching.
Since they were on sale, Laura bought these umbrella shoes without thinking. Literally, without thinking. Hungry for deals? You'd better come and satisfy it at KFC before doing something crazy. Wow Bucket, 7 pieces of chicken and 4 regular sides for $115. A finger-licking good deal.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com. Welcome back to Talking Point, ladies and gentlemen. So, Karen was pointing out some of the history with regards to Venezuela's relations to the rest of the Caribbean. And now the question, well, I posed at the top of the segment, what will be the response we're prepared to give? And of course, I don't want to speak for the government, They have to weigh the situation, the pros and cons of it, if the situation escalates any further. And right now, at the end of the day, you know, some of the behaviors of Venezuela mirrors some of the behavior that we criticize other states for, including at times the United States with regards to that same imperialistic tendencies on wanting to have control of natural resources. So how far will this go? To be fair, you know, it's not as though Venezuela has actually done anything yet. The intention to commit any sort of wrongful act without the immediacy of that threat to take place, you know, we have to wait and see. But the phone lines are open, the numbers should be up on your screen. You could call in and speak about this or anything else. There was other topics that I wanted to get into in the daily review, but I ran out of time trying to put together things. I don't know, Karen, if there's any more you want to speak about.
There's one thing which has absolutely nothing to do with what we're talking about, but Basil Perez, BC Perez.
Oh, yes.
I just want to add my voice to the sad passing, of BC Perez. He was all what people said. It was an article written by one of the contributors in the Express. This is before he passed away. I had spoken to other people who are very close to him. I was close to BC Perez. He had a satirical tongue. I mean, who can forget him? I'm writing about, I don't mean any offense, but of the former AG using black polish. I mean, he would not start an article without telling you, I don't know if he did use black polish in his hair, but I mean, Mr. Mirage, you know, and he would say all of these really quite out of, you know, you mean things that you think people would not say, but he was a man full of intelligence. I was at law school with him also. So I just want to add my condolences to the family.
We have our first caller from Tunapuna. Good morning, caller. Caller, you on there?
Yes.
Morning.
Hello?
Morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Ms. Karen Teixeira, and good morning, Sean.
Morning.
Yeah. This situation between Guyana and Venezuela seems to be a serious thing, because at one point of time, I think Trinidadians are forgetting how their people were being treated in the Gulf of Paria. We're not even hearing nothing like that. I mean, this thing is totally wrong, and they have their neighbors like Colombia and Brazil. Why don't they go and play the same game with them and snatch their country too? It's time now people in the Caribbean come together as strong as possible, because they realize they have a big population. And their population, to go to Venezuela, you have to get a visa. But to come into Trinidad and Tobago and go across into Guyana, they can go anytime, anyhow, any sort of law they could break and get away with it. Thank you.
Yes, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because years ago I lived in Point Fortin. And my father, on a weekend, would go fishing. And one of the greatest fears they had, and was a very real fear, was that either the Venezuelan pirates would hold them, which they were held up, watches they were held up at least on 2 occasions. But also we know, yes, they were. And that's just on a weekend trip that he would take. And then on the Guardia Nacional was an ever-present fear that people had, that they would say, you cross the boundary. You cross this boundary, because you know, I think it's 7 miles when you come down to the Caracas, between Caracas and the southernmost part of Venezuela. So we have had this sort of a military, let's say, aggression from Venezuela, who's not a CARICOM member. So I am going to put this straight on the laps of the government, because you know that you're turning a blind eye. And I don't want to say openly, but I'm going to tell you that I personally have had 2, actually 3, but 2 of them are I consider directly related to me, that I can see the use of these Venezuelan women for nefarious purposes that will go along with other things. And I don't want to say too much on it, but it is obvious that it is widespread, because I can't see that it could happen to me in a matter of months and then repeated recently wherever it has happened. And people who are in the real estate business are telling you that it is widespread. And it involves the use of Venezuelan women and all that it goes with it. So why is this government turning a blind eye, especially since Venezuela cannot be trusted? It has shown they cannot be trusted. Why is our Minister of Energy? I know you want to win the elections. I know you want to tell the people that you're doing a good job. But be frank with the people and stop telling them things that you know cannot be true. And I expect to hear a letter written to me or call me something. But I'm not personal. I'm talking for my country. Thank you.
Well, also, you're not talking about, I don't like how he looks, I don't like how
apparently a lot of people do.
He is, right? but this is the actions of the person in the office. It doesn't matter who's in the office.
There we go.
It's the actions of the office.
That's right.
I mean, one of our longtime callers, he's called frequently with regards to concerns about piracy on the seas and the lack of protection given to fishermen. I do have to wonder, all too often we think, oh, well, it won't happen to me. Like, we don't actively think that, but subconsciously it's there, right? Crime is a thing that happens to others, but as long as I'm untouched, I'm fine. I'm fine. Well, are we guaranteed? Tensions are escalating everywhere. If the situation with Guyana goes out of control, right, it's not necessary, it doesn't have to go as far as we get invaded or anything like that. But the piracy on the seas, if international law is now less sacrosanct, the piracies around our waters and our own citizens just enjoy our own waters,
but
not any commercial activity.
Into this country,
no, but
and using our health services or CDAP and not paying. I don't think they pay NIS, right? I don't think they pay NIS. What is that doing? They are not. The Prime Minister said they are not refugees. They said they are migrants. Well, guess what? If you want to be a migrant, then you have to register and you have to you can't be taking away jobs. This is not the Windrush generation, which I have to mention. When Trinidadians and Jamaicans and Caribbean people went up to England in 1948 after World War II, they were invited there. Now they don't want us anymore, apparently, but they were invited there. Why? Because after World War II, Europe was devastated.
Yes.
Many men, because that's who fought, men were the ones that put in the front lines. They needed to rebuild the Marshall Plan. So we were invited to the mother country to rebuild Europe until it was no longer of any interest to them. What is the issue with having all these Venezuelans in here if the Prime Minister says they are migrants? But then register and don't take away jobs from our people that can be done by our people. Look at the rush to Ghana. You have to question what is behind all of these deals and the opaqueness of these deals, the lack of clarity. The Express, I don't think the Express did. Let me be careful about that. But I do know that we have to be concerned about this deal with Venezuela. Don't you see what they're saying? I just read all things from them, what they have said, what our Eric Williams, the father of our nation, has said about Venezuela. You think it's changed? So I would love to hear people call in and give their views on this. Do you remember the young lady? No, I have nothing against the young lady, yeah?
Yeah.
I have nothing against the young lady.
No, my issue is with the pageant organizers and
but putting her forward. No, why put her forward? You are stroking feelings of what you call xenophobia, right?
That's a good point.
Yes, you are stroking feelings of xenophobia, which is unnecessary. Let them get registered. Do not take away jobs from our people because we are Trinidad first, Venezuela first, Trinidad first, and CARICOM first.
I just want to point out the Windrush generations. We need to understand, not only was there just World War II, World War I was not too far before that. So Britain and certain European countries had a significant demographic deficit, particularly of just male workers of a certain age, of a certain young
they all
age.
died in fighting
because
wars.
a lot of them died. It's not to say that Britain literally lost every single man between the ages of 20 and 35, but they lost a lot to the point where it wasn't. Russia's demographic situation
but we were
said to still be trying to
what are they
survive
doing in
from
our
World War II.
country? What are they doing here?
Yeah, we don't have the space.
Right.
We have a caller from, well, we have a caller on the line. Good morning, caller.
Think to Napuna.
Good morning.
Morning.
Morning to Karen and morning to John.
What?
And the nation. You know, you all are the only people that are addressing this problem. No other media, nobody else are having this discussion that you all are talking about. It's the cover us over with a sort of foolishness, and we fall to it. It's by nonsense, you know. And this is what goes on. Same thing goes on with the criminal things that go on here, where the police hands are tied because anytime a police shoot somebody, it's a thing. A man walk down the road, 3 men drag a old lady and they go and kick them and them are rights. What about her rights to walk on the street and to have her money? And this is the problem. A young boy was a gangster doing all into that thing and tell the police and them all the guns work. Then they come and they went and they think it now we there and they make a noise and say, no, the boy never this and the boy never that. And the boy was a mess. A mess.
Yeah.
And these are the things we keep allowing to go on and go on. And the politicians argue about it. I was listening to a senator telling them they have people in it. What about the ankle bracelet? I went to Rima Hospital. I was next in line for them to take out a thing called triathlon on me. I rushed away because the guests of the president, about 11 of them waiting to see this. And I have to wait till whatever hour them first. And all I had to do was to get an injection and ask them to take out his printer from in my hand. And these are the things that goes on here, and we allow it, and we pass by, and because we want to be yellow, green, pink, move, and whatever it is, and we are not dealing with the heart of the thing. One, I can wine and jam in St. James in the road, and I was telling them the law about when I was a little boy, loitering on the street. We used to start to run when police come. They used to run here because what you're doing out on the road. Now people out on the road, they're drinking, they're pulling up with their car, with their house, with their music, the brain noise, and they got their right to disturb you in your house. You can't watch your TV, you can't play with your grandchild, your child can't sleep, you can't sleep, all kind of nonsense, and that's their rights. And this is what goes on in this country. And we allow and we're happy with it, and that is it. Okay, have a blessed day.
Thank you, caller.
Thank you very much. Yes, and I guess that is our responsibility. I mean, I think WSN, to be very frank, and some of the newspapers, on occasion, will bring up issues, but we're really not wanting to really challenge, for example, you know, one of the big issues is the number of pieces of legislation that they pass, and you think, oh, they passed the legislation, oh, they got the equipment. But then when they get the Joint Select Committee meetings, then you find out the state of that equipment. So don't be surprised.
Well, the usage. Yeah, but has it actually been used? We have 1,000 body cameras. There's nothing that's come out of it that we at least.
But it's to keep you quiet, you see. Don't you understand what they're doing? They're keeping you quiet. They're telling you we're doing this, we're doing that. But if you go behind that smoke screen and they have Joint Select Committee meetings, you hear that 45 scanners not working. So don't expect the new scanners you get to be working, or they don't tell you in a year's time it's not operational because some piece missing or somebody something. Don't be surprised, you know. Don't be surprised.
I would just like to point out that
don't be surprised.
After the Petercan massacre and the death of the teenage, well, not just the 5, because there's a teenage girl Lalan who went to the police station to make a report and was murdered afterwards, right? So after those 2 incidents, we have suspects for those. We have a suspect for the shooting on the Deputy Commissioner of Police. Now, Customs and the Police Service, they have an exercise. It's been reported that they have interdicted drugs being brought on a ship. So I believe they have detained crew of the ship. But not a lot of details are coming on that. My point is, all of a sudden, we have these successes coming out about, oh, we got this suspect, that suspect, the next suspect, right? Although we found guns, but we have no suspect for the guns. And I do wonder if, okay, that's nice. Where was all of this flurry of successful investigations before. Now, to be fair, some of them, look, it's just police officers doing their job and they just happen to work things out in these situations. But the good news of it doesn't necessarily make me feel better that, oh, stuff is being done. No, because too many of the issues are systemic. The AG is now apparently putting things in place with legislation issues. But the question has to be asked, you know, why is it that governments of the day, and to some extent even us the people, we didn't know, we didn't ask these questions.
We didn't know.
But there's some things like, there's now legislation, I was talking about it earlier, Karen, to authorize the use of the police to conduct sting operations in drug and gun smuggling.
But
And
you know what's the problem?
I'm just kind of surprised that, you know, well, it's 2023 and there's now legislation.
Yeah, but you don't realize that they passed the legislation, but when after the legislation, but it has to be, I don't know if it needs proclamation.
Right.
Because a lot of legislation, you have to get assent and then it has to be proclaimed by the president. Like the procurement legislation, which I think people thought was in effect. But it wasn't until April that many key provisions of the legislation was proclaimed by the president, and it's only then it came into effect. So, but you have to go behind this. They just passed legislation, but you have to go behind these pieces of legislation and see what is the content. Because you don't pass legislation, they have Santa Cruz.
Well, I have a big question to ask you, but we'll take the caller from Santa Cruz first. Good morning, caller. You're on the air. Caller, you're on the air. Good morning. Hello. Santa Cruz, you're on the air. Good morning. I think we are connected. I just don't necessarily know if the caller is paying attention to his or her phone. Because I think I'm hearing feedback. Well, it looks like we might have lost the caller. All right. Well then, all right. Let's if they call back, they call back. But I have a question to ask you because you outlined. I don't want to go into the details, but you outlined the systems of legislation and things that was supposed to be put in place under the Patrick Mann administration. You were part of it as Minister of Finance because part of it included financial task force stuff. It wasn't just all pure crime fighting. It was all of the white collar stuff behind it. I do have to ask, it's 2023, the end of 2023. The elections are going to be, you know, maybe by the middle of 2025, if not sooner. I'm not sure what the actual limit is, right, when they have to be called. Could it be that whatever we see being done now at the end of the day is just, you know, politics because the elections is going to upset everything and the implementation is just going to be up in the air?
Well, what I would say is this from doing some research. I mean, I was even surprised. You know,
the reason why I say that is, of course,
he's back on.
All right, we have the caller back from Santa Cruz. Good morning, caller. Caller, good morning. Caller.
I think he's listening to his television or something.
I don't know if you're listening to TV, but I'm not entirely sure what's going on and why we're not hearing anything from the caller. Because we just got the caller back, so he should have been on the line. We may have a technical issue with the connection, which I'm not sure whose end it will be at this case. All right. Okay, yeah, the reason why I say that is because of the election that happened, it kind of upset the apple cart of the intended plans. So I don't know if, because these things that you were going to implement, it's only kind of now being implemented however many years later, and not in the same way.
But that's the problem, you see. The problem is it's one thing to pass legislation, and a slew of legislation is another thing to implement it, or to implement it effectively and continue to ensure that the purpose of which you pass the legislation is realized and continued. And what you see over and over again, I didn't even know, I mean, to be frank with you, because criminal law is not my area particularly, okay. You know, for instance, we have community legislation, community punishment as one of the options. In fact, the judiciary has a sentencing book in 2016 for all different kinds of categories of crime. We have electric monitoring, but the electric monitoring unit, according to what I understood, and this is change, they're not functioning. They have had the option of electric monitoring, community service. They've given you a number, the Bail Act, which of course has failed in terms of making murder not a bailable offense. So they go the death penalty. They've given up because really and truly, unless they can get the 3/5 majority, and even if they get it, there's always the power unless we untie ourselves from the Privy Council, they'll find a way to say that it still is valid, which is what we've gotten out of CCJ with the Nuvei case that Barbados went to after they joined the CCJ. So over and over again, we see pieces of legislation. We see some of the legislation that we did pass when I was there. Part of it was under pressure from CFATF, which is the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force, which was threatening to blacklist Trinidad and Tobago. So the FIU was passed, but you read the other day that Gary Griffith was successful in saying that they were looking into his and his wife's accounts, and it was unconstitutional. That's the court that said that, not Karen Teixeira. And so you have the FIU, you have the central bank, the credit union legislation that when I was there, thanks to the help from the IMF, from the governor of the central bank, as well as the fact that Ian McIntyre, who's now the head of the Law Reform Commission, we brought him in as a consultant. But all of these pieces of legislation, when I was there, a lot of it did not see either the light of day, and now we see under this government, is passing legislation, but when you look at the reality is, it sounds all nice and good, but when you look at the reality, you have the head of the Defense Force, Daniel, saying 50% of the equipment is not functioning.
Is it that the political leadership, regardless of who's in power, is more or less kind of fine with the status quo? And they don't necessarily want to push to do anything drastic to change that? And in part, look, the status quo in Venezuela, I do wonder if, you know, our lack of border security is in part to kind of not cause any incident. They don't want to upset our apple cart.
Well, all I would say is this. I wouldn't say that, of course, I might be seen to be partial, but I really do think that under Manning administration, half a term as it was, we were very serious about dealing with it. We had we had done a significant amount and had brought a number of pieces which were implemented and effected. What I will say, and that's my major criticism of this government, is a lack of implementation or a lack of follow-through or the emasculation of legislation that was intended to deal with the issues of crime. And it all comes back to this, and I think that is the major issue, a lack of confidence. I do not think to the man in the street, if you were to speak to him, and some people say they're not voting, especially the young people will tell you they're not voting. And the reason you hear that from them is because there's just a lack of confidence and a lack of trust between the people and the government, which is critical for the country to be able to move forward, to develop. You have to have that good relationship. You have to have that relationship of trust and confidence. And I think it is absolutely missing. And I think the data, like on the DNA and ballistics,
I think database legislation is coming through. I don't know if that means... I don't know if that means things for like a database for ballistics, because you need that for DNA and ballistics.
Yeah, but they have, I told you on the last occasion, 2018, 2021, the forensic center with DNA testing was not operational.
Right, exactly.
They had a backlog of over 32,000 for one of them for either ballistics and 42,000 for DNA. Okay, so they're just not telling you what is going to, telling you they're doing this, they're doing that, but when you go behind that smoke screen, you realize, what are they doing? Just passing laws that are not effective, and I think we'll run out of time.
So, caller from Santa Cruz, I'm so sorry, I don't know what it is, because we more or less went straight to your call twice. We didn't really have you waiting, and we couldn't hear you on air on our end, so I'm sorry about that. I don't know if maybe the broadcast, your voice got out, but we couldn't hear you here in the studio. I just want to finally wrap things up by saying, with what Karen says on implementation there, it is a big problem. It's not all about money, to be fair. There's a lot of other aspects to implementation than just money, but I also do wonder, and this might not be a popular thing to say, if the allocation to national security was big enough. It doesn't have to be 10 times bigger, but was it big enough? And of course, that would mean cutting from other things. And I get that. And there are some things that I might be willing to cut that maybe a lot of the country would not be willing to cut.
What you're supposed to be asking is, why do we have to do that? That's the question you're supposed to ask. Why do we have to do that?
Karen, that is an even longer discussion. So folks, let's end things there. As my coach always says, you can make today a good day if we try, and I always will say we do need to be more involved. That's one of my fears now coming up to the next general election. Not enough of us are involved, and then are we all going to lament the direction the country's heading if we leave it up to others? But we could make it a good one if we try, folks. We will see you tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.
WESN